Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to introduce your host for today, Chairman of Bench Events, Mr. Jonathan Worsley.
Well, welcome to the Global Restaurant Investment Forum. We're delighted to be here. We're delighted to have you here. And it's an exciting new conference for us. It's a bit like opening a new restaurant, I can only assume. You just hope and pray that you have a few clients coming through the door. Except with the restaurant, of course, they're open 365 days a year, and this is only an annual event. But I must say it does help if you've got a celebrity chef, someone like Pierre Gagné, who can open the doors for you. And certainly this morning, we had a fabulous breakfast for those of you that missed the breakfast session this morning. We had a fabulous interview that Stéphane Breck from Intercontinental Hotels performed with Stéphane Breck afterwards, with Pierre Gagné. And he spoke a lot about teamwork. He spoke a lot about family and respect the past. And he said, he doesn't want to be a show person. He says, I'm a chef. Everything you must prove. You are not just a name. So it was an exhilarating session this morning, and we were delighted to host that at the start of the conference. I launched with my partners 17 years ago the International Hotel Investment Forum. The first year we had around 250 delegates, and last week we had 2,000 delegates, 70 sponsors. I think if we had launched GRIF 17 years ago, we would have probably struggled to have had 20 delegates. But today we've got 180 delegates, and it's an exciting, extremely exciting industry, and we're so excited to be part of this journey. And we hope in 17 years we'll be at a similar number to the IHIF. I mean, just looking at the global trends, according to Data Monitor, the global food industry has grown by 18% over the last 5 years, reaching 992 billion. These facts tell an exciting story at this flourishing industry, and a great time to be in the business. In addition to GRIF, we run investment conferences, hotel investment conferences in Moscow. Actually, we were in Sochi last year, in Nairobi, where we've been for the last 2 years, and that event is going to again be held in Nairobi, then in Dar es Salaam, and then I think we're going to be in Accra. We're in Istanbul, we work in London, and of course the Arabian Hotel Investment Conference, which is in our 10th year, hosting before ATM in May. So from hotels, it's a natural extension to have a conference on food and beverage and restaurant investment. And of course, Dubai is a natural place for us to launch this event. It's a culinary hub. So our objective here has been to bring in the investment community, which is what we know, is what we're part of, to bring in the franchisees, the franchisors, the hoteliers, to network, learn from each other, and bringing concepts both from outside the region, from around the world, and new concepts from around the world into the region. So it's your conference. Please enjoy. We want to hear from you as well, because we want to make this a sustainable event going forward. We want to hear from you as to how we should grow this event, how we should change direction slightly, if you think we need to, who we need to invite in future. So your support, like the support we received 17 years ago for IHIF, would be greatly appreciated. Actually, I think I was having lunch with Henning Fries, and he said, "Oh, Jonathan, I was at your conference in the first year. I look forward to being at this one in 17 years. But there's probably a few others of you that were at my first conference 17 years ago. So a few thank yous. I'm sure I haven't got all the names that I should be thanking, but Stefan Breg, thank you for, when we spoke about this conference 2 years ago, you said absolutely, it's something we need to be doing. So I appreciate your advice. Julied from F&B Asset Management for Abu Dhabi National Hotels, Duncan Fraser-Smith, Managing Director of the Cutting Edge Agency, and they've been extremely helpful in advising us on program and speakers. To Gert Coppera, Jason Myers, Nick Clayton from the Jumeirah Group, thank you for that wonderful reception last night at the Emirates Tower Hotel. We had 6 head chefs showcasing their respective restaurants. The food was outstanding. And if you could actually just all show your appreciation to the Jumeirah Group for last night. To our sponsors, Denton's, Hodoma, Horizons, the Puccini Group, Kubara, Soho Hospitality, and Jumeirah. And we're delighted to be part of the inaugural Dubai Food Festival as well. Our supporters, Davis Coffer Lions, Emirates Academy. We've got a number of students here from Emirates Academy of Hospitality Management. We're delighted to partner with them. They've got great kids. And we also partner with them on the Arabian Hotel Investment Conference. We've got IHNRA, the Middle East Association, and Whole World Water, WWW. It's worth having a look at their stand. They're just behind those doors there, but they're all about, it's a fund that they've developed for those billion people who don't have access to fresh water. And the fund is created through providing for recycled bottled water in hotels and restaurants. They provide the equipment for the necessary to do that, and a percentage goes to raising money for the water fund. I'd also like to thank Insignia, who have been extremely helpful on the PR and getting the message out to the industry. And last but not least, I'd just like to thank my team, because I know GRIF has often been grief leading up to this event over the 2 years. So I wanted to thank, is Jennifer Pettinger in the room? Just a huge thanks to Jennifer. And we've got Annie Comain, Ocean Belcher, Marla Patel as well, working behind the stage, behind the desk, so thank you to them. Right, quick overview on the program. We've got 50 speakers. We've got some great topics over the next 2 days. And I've got 3 sessions right now before our coffee break. And they are setting the scene, the leaders panel, and around the world in 60 minutes. So to set the scene and speaking on hospitality trends, we have Grant Salter, who's the Director of Real Estate of Hospitality, Middle East region for Deloitte Corporate Finance. Unfortunately, Faram Razvivi, who's the Director of Investment at NBD Capital, apologized. He couldn't make it this afternoon, but he's going to join us tomorrow and have his presentation tomorrow. So without further ado, I'm delighted to bring Grant Salter to the podium.
Firstly, thank you to Jonathan and the team for inviting me to make this brief presentation to you. And I do plan to keep it brief, and I'll tell you why. And it's quite smart on their behalf to get the boring stuff out the way first, so that you can all enjoy the rest of the conference rather than having me bore you to sleep a little bit later on in the afternoon. What I'm clearly going to be talking about is trends, and that clearly comes with a bunch of statistics, which a lot of people just find quite boring and switch off. So hopefully I'll try and keep it a little bit fresh and alive for you and not get bogged down too much in the numbers. That's the reaction I was hoping for. Okay, so I'm not going to read through every line and go through every slide in all kinds of detail. It's basically just to set the trend for you and indicate why and how tourism and hospitality in particular is a benefit to your business and driving forward growth in tourism participation within Dubai and certainly within the region. So very briefly, if we just have a quick look at the, can we all still hear each other? So very quickly, the top left-hand, oh goodness gracious. If we look at the growth in tourism spend in the world, we look at relatively low spends globally of somewhere in the order of 3.5% to 5%. If we look at the tourism spend growth within the region, however, substantially higher. Certain areas we're looking at an average growth between 2009 and 2012 of in the order of 5.5%. Now, taking into account that was the start, 2009 was really the start of the economic downturn for this part of the world, and the recovery which has begun in the last 18 months or so, it's quite a substantial and meaningful improvement in that tourism spend. And that tourism spend translates into spend in your outlets, in the restaurant outlets. A couple of anomalies. Qatar, that's basically some statistical stuff. The data collection in the early parts of 2009 and 10 was not as succinct as it should be. But the meaningful areas are the likes of the UAE, almost at 9%, Saudi Arabia at 14.5%. Now, these are compounded growth rates over the last 4 years or so. So substantial opportunities there and going forward. If we look at the future and the projection of the future, the rest of the world is starting to catch up a little bit. At just short of 7% is the projection going forward to 2017, whereas the region looks in the order of about 7% as well. So again, continuing with that growth of around about 5.5%, looking forward, going at around about 6.3% going forward for the GCC specifically, but certain markets, Dubai, at least the UAE, certainly at 7.5%. Very, very strong indicators of where the market is likely to go and the bullishness that's sitting in the market. Again, more numbers, I'm afraid. We'll get to some pictures in a minute. This really just shows, is an indicator of how the market is improving, generally speaking, across the globe. In the key markets, if one looks at the US, occupancies are up, ADRs are up, RevPARs clearly are growing at a reasonably moderate pace. If we look at Europe, a similar kind of situation, edging up closer to where Dubai was in years gone by. The Asia-Pacific area is the only area that we've identified that is looking a little bit soft in terms of its growth, plateauing at around about 68% in terms of its occupancy and its ADRs, and RevPARs clearly dropping somewhat. Then we move into the region, and the Middle East and Africa as a combined territory is relatively flat in terms of its growth, and that's primarily driven down by some challenges within the African market over the last couple of years. But then we start to look at the Middle East, and that growth is pretty healthy, heading up towards 67%. Then we look at Dubai, 75% growing to almost 80% in terms of occupancy, and substantial RevPAR growth of around about 10% year on year for the past 2 years. So all of those are pointing to a very strong market, very strong drivers for the tourism and the tourism spend markets. An interesting aspect about the regional and domestic Dubai market is the mix of hotel standards and the types of properties available. If one looks purely at numbers, clearly at the top there, which I apologize, you'll struggle to see, but Dubai, that is the Middle East and Africa, somewhere in the order of 5,200 properties compared to the US, which is about 3 million properties, substantially lower. But the interesting part is the mix of those the type of properties. Middle East and Africa clearly at the top end of the market, the luxury and the upper upscale properties, substantially higher than the rest of the market, as you can see. If one then drills down further into the Middle East specifically, a substantial difference. Over 60% of the properties are in that top end of the sector. Drilling down further into the domestic markets within the GCC, one looks at markets like Dubai, certainly close on 62%, Jeddah almost there, Qatar 70%, at least Doha 70%. So it becomes very clear that the market emphasis in terms of development and the operations of hotels have been at that upmarket sector. And I'll get to some changes in the markets towards the end in terms of where that pipeline is going forward in terms of what DTCM's vision is, the Dubai Tourism and Commerce Marketing Department, what their vision is for the future in terms of the room stock. I'm not going to go through all of these line by line, but essentially the column to concentrate on is this right-hand column over here, which basically paints the picture. And again, this is from 2009, pointing towards substantial growth in virtually all of the metrics that one looks at for the hospitality and tourism business. So the number of hotels has risen on average 13%. The number of service departments is up slightly at a lower rate. The number of hotel keys is driving up substantially. Pretty much everything has gone up. The important factor for the restaurant business is this one over here, the number of hotel guests that is coming into the hotel guests and hotel apartment guests, combined up well over 35%. Now that means more customers potentially arriving at your restaurant door. More numbers, I'm afraid. Tourism growth and tourism spends, I beg your pardon. Substantial growth in the number of foreign arrivals and the number of domestic arrivals coming into Dubai specifically. Tremendous growth over the years, an average of 5.5% growth in tourism, in foreign tourist arrivals, and growth is projected to continue at just under 9% over the next 10 years. So again, everything is looking positive. All the numbers are pointing upwards, which is quite interesting. Passenger numbers going through Dubai International, substantial growth as well. Projections are 2013 number was 62 million and projected to hit just on 100 million by 2020. And these projections were done by Dubai Airports before the award of the Expo 2020 event, which is going to change those numbers substantially as well. The key source markets, where are the people coming from? Interestingly enough, when one talks to a lot of folk outside of the region about tourism, they instinctively think about Western tourists. Why that is, I don't know. But if one looks at the key drivers of demand for Dubai specifically, Saudi Arabia is the number one driver of tourism demand into Dubai, followed by India and then the United Kingdom and the United States. I'm not going to bother too much about the rest of those slides. Everything generally, again, is pointing upwards, showing positive trends in everything. Tourism spends are up, tourism arrivals are up, and and expected to continue to do so. This is perhaps the most interesting slide of the whole slide deck that I've put together. And why is it the most interesting? Well, it's very simple. This number over here. This is your average length of stay in Dubai. And if one goes back to 2002, the early days, the crazy days of Dubai, it's grown from 3.1 in your service departments to 5.4. which is somewhere in the order of 60% growth in terms of the average length of stay, and similar, and there's almost a 50% growth at hotels. Now, why is this important? That is critically important because it translates to more time that the guests have and time that they have to spend in your outlets, in the restaurant outlets, in the hotels, naturally, but within the economy. And it's money that they spend, time and money that they spend in the economy. So that's of critical importance to all of the rest of the slides that have gone before. Excuse me. Let's get some water. Right. Trying to read what we've got here. The hotel market performance, where has it been and where is it going? The market has grown substantially in terms of its performance from the around about 70% in the depths of the crisis. Most mature hotel economies would be delighted if they were to achieve 69%. Dubai, that was one of our low points. And it's been charging ahead to almost 80% in the full year 2013 at a combined growth rate of well over 3%. So that's a substantial improvement. Where is the growth coming from in terms of the supply? Because clearly there has to be significant supply growth that is needed to match that growing demand. And as you can see, that growth has primarily been, again, at in the luxury sector, in the top-end sector and the upper upscale sector. That is about to change with substantial efforts being put in place by the Dubai Tourism and Commerce Marketing Department to foster growth within that mid-market sector in the 3- and 4-star sectors, where much of you would have probably heard about the announcements made to drive a doubling of room supply. In fact, it's slightly more than double according to the DTCM. I won't give away numbers, but it's slightly more than doubling of the current room stock. And the majority of that growth, well over 60% growth, is found in both the 3-star and the 4-star markets. So that's where the focus is for the growth in room supply. So where is the market going? We've seen it's all pretty positive. It's been positive for the last 4 or 5 years, 4 years or so. Where is it going to from here? Well, it's still positive. What you see in these charts is the percentage growth, the year-on-year percentage growth. So as you can see, it's been pretty strong occupancy. There's been pretty strong growth. ADR has been pretty strong. And as a consequence of those two, pretty strong revenue, RevPAR growth for the past 4 years or so. We believe that it's going to slim down somewhat. It's going to still be positive growth, but instead of hitting 6 and 7 and 8% year-on-year growth, your growth is going to moderate to somewhere in the region of 3 to 4% across both those drivers of the market, and resulting in just under 5% per annum growth in RevPAR going forward. Now, that is taking into account the tremendous growth in supply that has been projected. So that gives you some indication of the type of opportunity that sits within the market. In a nutshell, what does this tell us about the market? We have we have strong performance in the past bunch of years, in the recent bunch of years. Going forward, it's still looking very, very positive. And all of this translates into one thing: more guests into Dubai, more tourists into Dubai, and more potential customers for your business to leverage off. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks for that, Grant. God, those were good slides. Hope everybody remembers all those numbers on those slides. But do we have any questions? Absolutely, this is great. We've got questions already. Fabulous. Can we have a mic down here? If you can just mention your name and stand up. Thank you very much. Stand up.
Denton's. I thought it was very interesting slides. I noticed you're mainly basing the figures on hotel numbers. I was just wondering if, I assume there isn't a separate statistic yet for restaurant or F&B figures, and whether now is the time to start compiling that, you know, we even have a dedicated investment forum for that industry, because I think it'd be useful to see how much food is eaten in hotels, how much is eaten outside, and you know how the different fast food to fine dining segments break down.
No, thanks for that. That does make sense. I know it is something we have all looked at in the past. I mean, we looked at the bench, which became STR Global. But do you have any information on?
Certainly, it's a very good question, and as consultants and advisors, it's something that's the kind of information we've been trying to get hold of for ages. There are a number of challenges with that, shall we say, in respect of gathering that kind of data. There's a lot of concerns in respect of the confidentiality of that data on an individualized basis. It would be something that would be welcomed, is how I would answer that. We would certainly assist where possible in terms of driving that process.
Okay, great. So, I mean, obviously very important that, you know, big picture, hotels, development and everything else, because that's a big driver for the restaurant industry. Are you concerned about the enormous supply that's coming into the region and specifically Dubai?
I think concerned is perhaps too strong a word. There are some challenges in our view as to how that's going to be delivered. If one looks at it in simple terms, somewhere in the order of 300 hotels, if that vision is to be achieved, somewhere in the order of 300 hotels will need to be delivered in the space of, let's say, 5 years. That's a tall order in any game. It's a massive order. So the issue for us is not the quantum, but how it will be done. What we want to avoid is a situation, and it's clear there's two components to why that target has been set. One is clearly Expo 2020, which will put immense strain on the inventory of hotels in any market. And there's clearly a vision to put Dubai back on the map again, not that it ever was off the map, but to re-establish itself as the tourism leader, certainly within the region. There are concerns post-event, certainly in the likes of 2020. We did a lot of work on the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. And there are lots of concerns about post-event legacy and whether the market will sustain that quantum of rooms. So there are some concerns in terms of supply and demand, but I think our major concern is how one gets to that quantum in such a short space of time, and the impact that will have on the wider economy in terms of construction costs. Because if you just think about 300 new hotels coming into the market, somewhere in the order of 60 to 70 new projects a year, what impact that's going to have on commodity prices, construction costs, and so on.
I've got a question, because we were talking briefly before, which you haven't mentioned, but that's on licensed premises and the number of non-licensed premises that are coming into the region and specifically into Dubai. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, it's an interesting topic, this. And I think if you would speak to most or a lot of restaurateurs who come from the West, who are familiar, a restaurant means you have alcohol with it. It just kind of goes without saying. And if you remove that component, there's a fear that the restaurant cannot work. It just can't work. People want to have a drink. That's true if the majority of your custom is of a Western base and wants to have alcohol with their meal. But I think we very easily forget, if you have not been embedded in this business for a long time, you quickly forget that there's a substantial market out there. I showed it earlier on. The majority of the tourism source coming into Dubai is out of Saudi Arabia. And a lot of that, of the tourism is regional tourism. A good example is in Qatar at the Pearl, and I think a lot of us may have had our fingers burnt or certainly warmed up considerably with the challenges that have been experienced at the Pearl. But what has happened there is that a lot of those outlets have turned around their businesses and are now far more successful than they were when they did have licenses, because the domestic market, the local Qataris, have come back to those outlets, whereas previously they avoided them. So I don't think it's necessarily a definite A plus B, restaurant plus license equals success. It doesn't have to be that way. And it just means creativity in terms of how you target that market and how you go to market with that particular product.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, thank you, Grant. Do we have one last question from the audience? I can see we're short of time, so Grant, please show your appreciation to Grant.
Thank you.